Good morning. I've got to go down and work in the shop today, so I'm not going to have time to do a bunch of videos or work on any of the other series. But I do have time for this one video here. It will support the information of the other videos and how we've been seeing it. And if this is somebody that might be watching this channel for the first time, or this is the first video you view, you'll probably still understand it, but once you view the other videos in retrospective, this will make a lot more sense. In a way, we're going to talk about ancient sayings that come down to us as cliche slogans or wisdoms. And the one that you're looking at here is a famous one. People even build their collegiate reputation on this slogan here. And it is, the pen is mightier than the sword. But really, I'm going to be asking it in a question. The pen is mightier than the sword? We're going to find out that it's not. And to help us understand, to get to the root or the foundation of where this saying comes from, we have to go back in ancient times. And that's why all of these sayings themselves are still surviving to us today, and that our parents are born into knowing them, their parents are born into knowing them, and it just keeps going back and back and back. It's kind of like the window to the soul is through the eyes. And if you know that what we've been talking about over here, then now you begin to see the shape of the window develop, right? And then if we were going to apply now this window shape over this sun looking out of our window to this light of the sun, well, you begin to understand how this is really coming from high spiritual experience with this past that we had, where profound spiritual truths were being understood, and at the same time there was a deception that was trying to corrupt this truth, and that these slogans, these cliche sayings, have survived as a way to assure that we would always understand what the truth was. And we'll get back to this thing when we get back to the series to talk about this in retrospect with the window. This 4-paned window that you're seeing right now is telling you from the most ancient past that the window to the soul is through the eyes. And in Joel 2, that's exactly where this army enters into. It enters into the windows. All right, so you can see that there's a fullness there that's coming from our past, that are wisdom warnings, if you will. Well, this pen is mightier than the sword is no different. It's got all of the information. It's going to fulfill the fractal from Genesis even until our time right now in an amazing way. Let's think about one other thing just to kind of prepare the soil correctly. Maybe two other things. You've heard something that's probably the most famous slogans there are. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Now, where in the world does that come from? I mean, think about it. Well, we know that these ancient mighty men were supposed to be larger. They were supposed to be much more stout than their fellows. They were supposed to be mighty. In other words, grand, larger than life, bigger than their fellows. Now, it just so happens that these Elohim are considered fallen. And angel literally means messengers. So when we say fallen angels, we're describing fallen messengers of God. And that's exactly what these sons of God were. So the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You can see the root of impression that was left on the collective psyche of mankind was so profound that their truth as they experienced has survived and projected throughout the ages to come to us as this simple wisdom that even a child could understand. So that when the time comes and these things begin to manifest, your very simple childlike understanding can begin to grasp it. It reminds me of something that Jesus Christ is quoted in saying, that unless you see the kingdom, or you see the world through the eyes of a child, you're going to have a very hard time entering into the heavenly kingdom. And he almost, if I remember correctly, declares that you will not be able to unless you use these eyes of a child. Now, I don't think that he's describing the spirit abode. I think that he's describing that thy kingdom come, that spiritual reality that you can dwell in while you're still in the tabernacle of flesh. That is using and living by your spirit sight, your faith, with Jesus Christ as your lead up on the cross. That's thy kingdom come, and he will see you through that valley of the shadow of death. Well, in order for him to do that, you have to have those eyes of a trusting little child, that their eyes have not already been corrupted, indoctrinated, and tradition bound, to where they're unable to see the simple truths all around you that Jesus Christ knows are already all there. In his eyes, nothing is hidden from. So if he can get this truth to be able to be received in your eyes with the trusting eyes of a little child, everything will be made plain to you. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So the bigger they are, the harder they fall. All right. Let's talk about werewolves real quick, because at the same time, these beings are depicted as wolves. And they're depicted in wolves in the Bible. It even comes back to where they originally descended from, which would be Mount Hermon, is also known for wolves. The symbology is all there, just like the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. Everything's going to be fractal complete. So werewolves. A werewolf is supposed to be a unification of a beast and a man. Well, that's the same symbology that the sons of God are. They're the unification of a beast themselves with the daughters of men. And then they form these cherubim, unification of two or more creature-like creatures. The same symbology for the Sphinx. Where do we get the Sphinx from? The Sphinx is the symbolism for them. These young lions, as they mated with the daughters of men, now they're co-joined. They're a beast. At the same time, they're a beast because they're fallen. And then at the same time, they're joined to man, which was on the rise from his animal estate and his animal urges. But once they were united, then the animal urge was fused back into man. And then mankind has been caught in the cycle once again. So the werewolf is symbolism for these wolves that are in sheep's clothing. Now the sheep is the flock, which is the men that are following Jesus Christ. So we have wolves that are in sheep's clothing. They're in the clothing of a man, pretending to lead those to the truth. Well, these messengers, or these Elohim, as they were, they're the messengers of the God, or the messengers of God. Now they're the messengers of the God of evil. No longer the messengers of the God of the fullness of the truth. Now they're the messengers of the God of the deception. Okay, so they've switched. Now they become the wolves in this sheep's clothing. So this brings us up to what you have been given in horror films and stories and fables with the werewolf. What kills a werewolf? And we'll see the truth of all this. What kills a werewolf? Well, you know that the werewolves are connected to the pentagram, and you also know that the werewolves are connected to the full moon. All right? And then we know that the full moon is symbolism with the Babylonian moon god, Sin, and then Sin means illumination, which connects back to Mount Sinai, which means shining, and which is a root derivative from the word sin itself. So we're perfectly on the trail for what we're talking about. So what kills these wolves in sheep's clothing? Well, it's silver. It's silver. Now we need to connect that back to another cliche saying, silver tongue. That's what the childlike mind has to begin to see the connection of truth. The werewolves are killed by silver, and then you know the expression of somebody that's supposed to have a silver tongue is a good, fluid talker. Now, fluid brings us to the water word of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ's word is considered the sword. This sword is a sharp, two-edged silver sword. The silver tongue that kills the wolves is none other than the living word of Jesus Christ. Fractal complete. Now that you can see all of that, maybe you can begin to see all of this. The question, is the pen mightier than the sword? Well, no, it's not. Who's the pen? Because we know who the sword is that they're talking about now. Okay, so the question is that we need to find an ancient root, absolutely, that will fulfill who this pen is. And it's going to blow you guys away when you see how this connects to the entirety of this channel's history and the perspective of what I'm telling you. So Jesus Christ is the sword. But when they're describing that the pen is mightier than the sword, we know what sword they're talking about. They're not talking about a sword that has caused death or pain in perspective to Jesus Christ, because you know that Jesus Christ, this is going to be Matthew chapter 12. Jesus Christ wants no sacrifice. He only wants mercy. But if ye had known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, ye would not have condemned the guiltless. That's in representation to him on the cross, for them condemning him and putting him on that physical cross when Jesus Christ was coming to fulfill the spiritual cross. And he was guiltless. Now they're trying to condemn all of us who follow him, who follow the guiltless. They see us as needing to be condemned, and they're going to condemn us also. And that's this coming sacrifice that they're trying to say is going to be done in the name of God, from Isaiah chapter 34. So we're also the fulfillment of this guiltless. And he's telling you he wants no sacrifice if you would just figure out what this means. And with childlike eyes, we've already done that. We've already done that. So they can't be talking about a sword here that is a bad sword that's killing or hurting people, because we know that Jesus Christ's word is the living word. So they're talking about another sword. To prove that the sword that they're talking about is in relationship to Jesus Christ, it's because they're trying to describe it as in the truth is going to be maintained by this pen. Well, you know for a fact that Jesus Christ did not write. So it's really a representation of two swords that are battling here. One is the dead letter. The other is the living word. This dead letter is speaking out and declaring that the pen is mightier than the sword. This living word, this living sword that did not write nothing because he lived it. And that's why it's the living way. And we're not bound to the letter. We're bound to the life, the truth of the life that he manifested to this world. So he had no need to write nothing down. He absolutely lived it. He lived it. So who's this pen now? Okay, well, to figure out who the pen is, we would go back to the ancient times. And believe it or not, in the book of Enoch, in this chapter, we're going to find exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and start reading here at verse 8. From his hand were these things derived to them who dwell upon the earth from that period forever. The name of the fourth is Penemu. He discovered to the children of men bitterness and sweetness. Well, wow. Isn't that exactly the same thing that we see in Revelation chapter 8 concerning the second trumpet, and in that flaming mountain that falls upon the waters that now makes them waters bitter? And then I told you that represented the flow of knowledge, right? Now this bitterness and sweetness, that's the bitterness, okay? They've made the waters of truth, okay, through their writing, because they have tried to instill, at the same time they've made the living word bitter, they've tried to instill this vanity of this sweetness. And we know the sweetness is what tempts the children. And then we ourselves are being represented as having to have these childlike eyes of the child to understand. Well, now use your childlike understanding to see that this sweetness is the temptation of the vanity. I got a train coming. Alright, because this train is going to be a little long, I'm going to come back